Hello, Agora.Community. Welcome back to the conversation. We have a very special guest here today. And actually, we have two special guests here today, to be completely honest. David's not here today, so we have Jacob flying co-pilot. And he's going to be probably more the pilot today because he has actually had the pleasure of working with this wonderful person in the past. So I'm actually going to bring in Jacob right now so he can do a bit of an introduction. So let's all say hi to Jacob Gardner. Hello, Jacob.
Hello.
Welcome back.
How's everybody doing? Thank you.
Doing good.
Good to be here.
Doing good.
I am very excited for today. We get to talk with Peter Ramsey. I had the pleasure and honor of working with him on Rise of the Guardians at DreamWorks. And I can say, without a doubt, he's one of my favorite directors I've ever worked with. I can go into detail about why that is, but it is honestly very true. But he's also been a storyboard artist and illustrator of things like Independence Day, Fight Club, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Amazing list on his resume. Not to mention directed Into the Spider-Verse, which is among everyone's favorite movie these days. And now
absolutely
the sequels are coming out and he'll be executive producing those. Should we bring him in?
I think we should bring him in. Mr. Peter Ramsey, how are you, sir?
Oh, hey. Hey, everybody. Hey, guys.
Welcome.
How's it going?
Thank you for having me here. Hey, all Agora people.
Thank you so much for being here.
Corner of the Whoa. Sorry, that was a little loud. My bad.
What does that mean?
It just means someone just subscribed to our channel. That's basically what that means. I'll tone those down a little bit.
That was quick, though. You bring Peter on for a half a second.
That's it.
Subscribes.
Can you stay here all day, Peter? That'd be great. That'd be really great.
I think the numbers will start declining like after the first 15 minutes or so. Maybe not even that long. We'll see. We'll see.
It's really awesome to have you here. Thank you for taking some of your time out of your day to join us and talk.
Great to be here,
animation.
It's it's so funny. I'm thinking back how long ago it was that we worked together. You were just you were like what, 15 or something like that?
I think it was my third or fourth feature film. It was pretty early on in my career. I was still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah.
It was
so you were 16. Fun. You were 16.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. That was what year was that we were working on? That was
I was on it 2009 to 2012.
Okay. So all right, cool. What were you gonna say, Brent?
Yeah.
I was going to do a little Google search to just to sort of try to triangulate, but it looks like you guys nailed it. Yeah.
Yes. So before even DreamWorks, what were some of the things that really stood out to you in your path to get there? Like I mentioned, some of the things you storyboarded on, which were amazing contributions to like pop culture in general. What were some of your favorites?
You named a couple of them. Bram Stoker's Dracula and Fight Club. I mean, both those were directed by directors I was like I worshipped, you know. So those were huge milestones for me. I learned so much from both of those guys, and it was just amazing to be able to work on, you know, shows that were where the art of it was so much at the forefront, and where you really got to have a ringside seat at seeing how a really great director kind of pulls a movie together. And that's what I was interested in. I mean, it's really the reason I got into storyboarding in the first place, was to learn about being a director, you know, and that's awesome. while paying rent and you know, raising a family at the same time. So it was kind of a long, extended film school for me. I took the slow route, but there were a lot of
some of the sequences.
What's that?
I'm curious to know what sequences you helped board on Fight Club.
Oh,
I've watched that movie so many times.
Most of them. The crazy thing about Fight Club was that Fincher, and I didn't know it before going in, but Fincher is a huge believer in storyboarding, or at least he was back then.
Yeah.
And it was like he'd storyboarded everything. So just about, I think the only sequence I didn't storyboard, or the only couple of sequences, weirdly enough, there were a couple of the big VFX sequences that I didn't storyboard, like the plane being, you know, the plane being like torn apart and in the dream sequence in the middle, and I think there was the brain title sequence.
Oh,
I didn't do. That was because the title company was working on that.
Yeah, motion graphics guys were probably doing it.
Yeah, and in the plane, I think that was a thing that David kind of, he may have gone straight to previs with that, but it was super early days of previs, so I may be talking completely out of my behind, but he that was something that he had, that I think some work had already been done on. But everything else, like just about everything else, he would like give me a little shot list or talk through it, or and I would go home and pump them out. And
I wonder if that has something to do with his, because I believe his background originally was in music video production. I think he was he was directing music videos. I wonder, because I mean they probably heavily bore music videos, I would imagine. So maybe that's
probably, but I think even more than that. Before he was a director, he worked. He was doing visual effects stuff at Industrial Light and Magic.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So that kind of work demands a lot of specificity and,
Mhm.
and heavy storyboarding, heavy pre-visualization of whatever kind. So I think that the exacting nature of his films and the way he makes them owes a lot to that kind of thinking. So yeah, that was a really wild experience. And then I worked with him again after that on Panic Room, and we did a few commercials together. And he was a good guy. It was a great time. Really interesting.
I love his work. I haven't seen his work. I don't even know what he's doing these days, because I feel like he was so prolific there back during the Panic Room and the Fight Club days, and then he kind of slowed down a little bit.
Well, he kind of pioneered the whole streaming thing with House of Cards, which
Yeah, that's a good point.
went on Netflix. That was really the thing that kind of ushered in this idea of new shows and movies.
But there could be some really high quality stuff that isn't direct to the theater.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so he kind of pioneered that, and he's Mindhunter and I think a few other things that he's been mostly concerned with these days, kind of exploring that form. But just put out Mank, and I know he's shooting another movie. So, but
right.
Yeah, there was David Fincher. I did John Singleton's first 4 films.
Oh wow!
So that was super exciting working with John. That was an exciting time. I did 2 with Spielberg, AI and Minority Report.
Oh, yeah.
I got to work with Ang Lee once, who I worship.
Oh man.
So there's been a lot of great people that I've been super lucky to work with, just in storyboarding. So that was all like a great education and kind of prelude to starting to explore directing on my own.
For real, I mean, you were working directly with all the masters.
It's crazy. What a
it was great. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, I still pinch myself when I think about some of the stuff I got to do. It was literally like a laundry list. If you'd asked me when I was, what was I, like 26, I guess, 25, 26 when I started. And if you'd asked me, who would you like to work with? And I'd go, well, this is never going to happen, but I don't know.
But
Spielberg,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
What was one of the most surprising things to you, if you recall, about working with Spielberg or Ang Lee?
One of the most surprising things.
Yeah.
I think how focused and how focused they were and how hard they worked. I mean, that's the thing when you're with some of these guys and you see these movies made and you think, oh my God, these guys must be super geniuses to be able to make something like this. They make it look so easy, and you figure they know something that you don't, that they're able to work this kind of magic, because you're not seeing all the blood, sweat, and tears behind the scenes. But those dudes work hard, and they're really thinking in depth about, they really dive deep into it in the process of making it. It's not a casual thing at all, and they really give themselves over to the story like completely. So that was an eye opener for me, and not thinking that it was it's only something geniuses can do. You know, and those guys don't have to work. It just it just drips off their fingers. It's like, no, they come in and they put in the work, and that's kind of why they are who they are, you know. I see a question over here. Your IMDb says your first gig was Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Yes, my first like feature movie gig was Nightmare on Elm Street 5 with Stephen Hopkins directed that. Yeah.
What a friggin' entry into the film industry. That's interesting.
It was pretty wild.
I'm curious. So you started obviously doing all these, like, it just almost seems like I almost want to ask the question, what movies did you not work on? Because the list that you've just been casually dropping here and there are just like pretty much filling my list of top iconic films from my years back. But I'm wondering, like, how did you? So because you started in live action film. And you started as storyboard artist, and just worked on all these huge films, sponged off all of these amazing directors, and eventually transitioned into the director space. Like, do you feel like all those years was that always in the back of your mind that you wanted to do that, or was it just something that just sort of happened? Okay, that's cool. Interesting.
From minute one. Yeah, wow. Yeah, it literally was. You know, you have to take yourself back to it's like a different time and a different era. Think of no internet, right?
Yeah.
Think of like,
wait, what?
You know, just all you know about movies is what you're reading in movie magazines and what you might see once in a while on like Entertainment Tonight on TV, or books that you get from the library that are like, you know, 5 years out of date. I mean, there just wasn't as much general knowledge about the intricacies of the business. So, I mean, for me, it wasn't until my early 20s that I was really understanding that, you know, ordinary people worked in the movie business. To me, it had always been something that was, you know, and I loved movies. I knew a lot about them. I was just starting to learn about, you know, what directors actually did, and really getting into, you know, more artsy fartsy cinema and really kind of studying it as a thing. But the idea that, you know, that I could actually work in it just there was like some barrier that idea would never penetrate. And I started meeting a few people who were on the fringes of the industry, and it just started dawning on me. I was like, wait a minute, is this actually something I could pursue? Is this? And then it was like a thing, you know, I had zero money. You know, I had been in college at UCLA trying to study painting for 2 years, and it wasn't painting at the time. That's a whole other story, but I dropped out, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just knew I was really the artistic, you know, talent or skill that I did have was geared more toward narrative somehow, and I gradually started putting two and two together, and wait a minute, you know, I think what I'm really interested in is telling stories with images. That's what I've always gravitated toward. And maybe I could work in the movies. I'd really love to do what those directors do. I think I'd seen E.T. with some friends, and you know, we had been big movie fans, so. You know, The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, and you know, Taxi Driver, you name it. You know, we were into all that stuff. But for some reason, it was going to see E.T. and seeing how much that movie like took the audience and just put a spell on it at that particular screening. We were at, and we came out of the theater, and people were so emotional and so overwhelmed. And I just came out going, God, I would love to be able to do that. I'd love to be able to do that. And it just, all these things kind of came together with like, yeah, it's that guy, Steven Spielberg, who also did Close Encounters that you loved and made you feel like that, and Jaws. And I was just like, there are specific people who do. That's what I want to do. I want to be a director. If a director does that, I think that's what I want to do. And from that minute, I just started like everything I could about what it took to be a director. I just started vacuuming up. But, you know, I didn't have any money. I was too poor to make a movie. I was like, how do I do it? How do I get to it? I can't afford film. I can't afford a camera. And this idea of storyboarding came about. I was like, well, I can do that. I can draw good enough that I could storyboard something. Because for a long time I thought I was going to be a comic book artist, but
naturally,
kind of like bogarted all that. And pretty quickly following that revelation, I stumbled onto an agency that repped storyboard artists for advertising, and they were moving toward repping people for movies. So I think I sent samples in like twice. I got rejected the first time, and then a few months later I tried again, got in, and I started doing, like, I remember, I think my first job was like a cat litter commercial. This little like indie cat litter commercial. And I just started doing a bunch of commercials, and after a year they got me a job on an indie feature that was never made, but I had enough samples that I could go out and they could pitch me for other work, and that's how I got Nightmare on Elm Street.
Cool. Wow. That's, I don't know, your story is just incredible. I love it. So how did you?
Not incredible at the time. It just seemed like, honestly, I just see, if you guys had been back there, you'd have been, well, like, why don't you just do this, or why don't you just do that? But I was like, it felt like I was like gradually discovering this stuff, and if it was now, and I had an iPhone and Final Cut Pro on my computer, I would just started making movies back then.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, but you didn't. So you used what you had, which was your drawing
basically,
to find another way to form that narrative structure that you wanted. And
do you remember the epiphany of when you actually had this sort of, because it seemed like you had this creative sort of this creativity inside of you, and it needed an outlet. You felt like film was a good outlet, but where was the connection made, do you think, to like that storyboard was the obvious sort of entry choice to get to that sort of directorship that would be leveraging your current skill set? I mean, was it because someone like, was it doing all the research into filmmaking that you dawned on this, or you're like, oh man, that's it, that's totally it? Or is it something said something one day? Like, do you remember?
Somebody said something one day, and the way it happened, here, another crazy story. Here's what happened. Because you would think that, I had, my Star Wars books at home, and they had storyboards in them, and I'd see them, and I'd sit there and I'd go, oh, I could draw that. But the light bulb still didn't go on.
That's funny.
Then you should go try to do it. I was working at a bookstore. Like it was a bookstore, a chain called Walden Books. It used to be in malls and stuff like that. And a guy came in, and I helped him find a book. And I can't remember how we got onto the subject, but he said, "Oh, I'm an editor. I'm working on. I worked on a movie called The Right Stuff."
Oh, nice.
And I was like, "Oh my God, I love that movie!" And we started talking about The Right Stuff. And I guess the guy had been having a hard week, and he was like, "Oh man, this is so great. Thanks." He really appreciated me wanting to talk about The Right Stuff. So he asked me what I did, or what I wanted to do. And this was before I had this was before I had the nerve to tell anybody I was actually, interested in the movie business, because I didn't believe I could do it. And even when I'm standing here talking to a guy in the movie business. So I just said, I'm an illustrator, because at that point I really thought I was, I don't know, I'll try to do comics. Maybe I'll do illustrations for magazines or book cover, who knows, whatever. But to him, an illustrator meant like a production illustrator, aka storyboard artist.
Absolutely.
So he said, "Oh, I know a really good illustrator over at Paramount, where I'm working on the show now. I bet he'd talk to you for a little bit and
oh man,
and clue you in." So I was like, "Wow, really? You think so?" And I never would have thought of it. But sure enough, he arranged for me to come on down, and I met this guy. His name was Maurice Zuberano, and he was a storyboard artist who had worked like since the golden age of Hollywood. And he, showed me his stuff that he was doing, his, some boards he was doing for this project over there. Looked through my sketchbook, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, you could do this easily." He was, super encouraging, and I was like, "Wow, you mean I could." And that was when that was
the genesis moment
as a path started opening up, because I think I had already decided, I want to be a director someday. with no clue as to how I could ever get there.
What's the trajectory, right?
But
Suddenly it dawned on you. You saw the path.
Yeah, I saw a path where I could get a toehold in the industry, make money at the same time that I was learning and possibly meeting people and soaking up more knowledge. So it was kind of like everything I needed in one fell stroke was answered by storyboarding.
And what was the first opportunity you had to transition into a director position out of storyboarding? Or was there an intermediary step?
Well, the very first nibble at it, because I was always, at the same time, I was writing, I was teaching myself to write. So I was trying to churn out these, mediocre scripts. I was always just reading and vacuuming up everything I could about movies and movie making. And I had worked with John Singleton on on Boys in the Hood, and we really hit it off.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was great because, I don't know if a lot of people know, but John was talk about a film nerd. He was a super film nerd. So we would talk forever about Spielberg and about you name it, man. We would just like dissect things together. And so on his second movie, Poetic Justice, I remember we were just starting, and I had turned in a scene I had been working on, and he was leafing through it, and he was really liking some of the ideas. And I said, man, I don't know if you ever want to be a director or anything, but you should really think about it. And I was like, hey, why do you think I'm doing this, you knucklehead? I mean, that's exactly what I want to do. And right on the spot, he went, you know what? We have a week of second unit that we need shot that the producer was going to do.
Wow.
But he can't do it. I'm gonna push you for it.
Oh man.
And if anybody's seen that movie Poetic Justice, the part of the plot is this mail truck that goes up the California coast to that's kind of the spine of the story. It's this like road trip. And so all the stuff of the truck going up PCH and taking all these windy roads, that was us on the second unit out there shooting that stuff. So John Singleton was responsible for me getting my first little directing experience on a studio motion picture. Excuse me, my allergies are messing with me here. But that was like the first real bite of the apple. And after that, I did a couple more second units for John, and then I did what was the other? Was the next one Tank Girl? Yeah, it might have been.
Of course you worked on Tank Girl. Of course
it was late 90s. A movie called Tank Girl, and I got the second unit on that. And that was a big second unit. That was like a 75-person crew. So that was super fun, and we did all the stuff with the tank and explosions and soldiers running around and kangaroo men jumping around. And as a result of that, a couple of years later, the guy who produced Tank Girl, a guy named Aaron Warner, called me from DreamWorks Animation, where he was prepping the first Shrek movie.
Oh,
and
boy.
Said, hey, I don't know if you're interested in animation, but I'm working on this thing called Shrek. I think it's going to be new and kind of interesting, kind of fun. And at that time, CG was just in its infancy. And he was basically inviting me over to, be on one of the first story teams for that. And I was like, I don't know. I'm doing this, I think I was probably doing a David Fincher film. I think I literally may have been doing Fight Club. And I was kind of like, yeah, animation's it's great, it's cute, but I'm doing real movies, so I'll talk to you later. So, jump forward, of course, Shrek comes out. There's this huge revolutionary boom in CG, and over the next couple of years, it really comes of age. And I get another call from him when they're prepping Shrek 3. And he goes, hey, I'm going to try again because I think you might be really suited to this. But, we're prepping the third one now. And I'd love it if you came out and checked it out. I think it could be a good opportunity for, maybe for you to direct at some point. But he also said, I think this is a really pure form of cinema. And I think you would enjoy it. And I was like, okay, I'll come check it out. And, got to DreamWorks, the campus, and it was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And when you're walking around there, it is like you're on a college campus more than other movie studios. This seemed so geared toward the art, and that the artists were right at the center of the process, and it was really appealing. So I was like, yeah, I'll try this out for a little bit and see how it goes. And they just kept like giving me little breadcrumbs, and try this, be ahead of story, be this,
That's it.
do that.
Kept pulling you back in.
And it eventually culminated into me getting to direct. First, I think the first thing that I directed was a TV special based on Monsters vs. Aliens, like a Halloween special.
Monsters versus Pumpkins, right?
That's it. Yes, that was it. And that was super fun. And it was a great way for me to really learn how the studio worked from the perspective of a director. And then after coming off of that, because they were pretty happy with how that went, and they offered me Rise of the Guardians.
Awesome.
And the rest is history.
Excuse me. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. It was.
What was the?
I
was gonna say, what was the most unexpected thing? Oh, sorry. I must have a delayed connection. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say I had never intended to get into animation. It just sort of happened. It was like a weird detour, but it's been amazing for me. I've learned so much. I learned so much about storytelling and writing, and it's just been an amazing education in filmmaking.
That's so cool. You mentioned learning what it's like from the director perspective at the studio. I'm interested to know what was the most unexpected thing that you found once becoming the director in that position.
I think probably the most unexpected thing is how much kind of in an unspoken way you're expected to drive the process. It's a thing. You're at a big studio, and it's this weird thing of decisions are still being made at the studio level and at the producer level, whatever. So there's that, but there is it's one of those weird things where part of doing the job is kind of is sort of just doing your own thing, and you don't really, at least I had never quite grasped that until I was sitting in the seat myself, the degree to which that was true. And I think it is one of those things that until you actually do it, you don't really understand that. You don't really understand that, oh, now people are listening to you. So the things you say and the things you do, and it's not just that you have to, it's more about communicating the spirit of a project. You know what I mean? So it's a thing that you kind of you weirdly have to be able to be yourself and do it the way you would do it. There's no hard and fast rules really for how to direct. And that was like a big one to me. And I'd been around so many different directors that I knew that intellectually to a degree, but actually being there and doing it myself was like, oh, it kind of makes you think about who you are and what you're comfortable with in a whole different way.
I'm curious as to what you feel what differentiated directing for live action versus directing for animation. Like, what were the big key takeaways there? Was there anything surprising coming out of the woodwork on that level?
No huge surprises. Maybe I think in animation, the process is so much more sort of it's more of a marathon in a way in animation, because there's you're building everything from the ground up. Just the sheer span of time, especially on an animated feature, is that's long. Things are happening. The pace that things are happening at, you're waiting longer for things to kind of gestate, and in that time, you can get bored with things just because you're familiar with them, but maybe you shouldn't get bored with them. People can start wandering off on different paths, and it's a real challenge to sort of hold on to the original vision of the movie, because there's so many, because just of the sheer span of time. There's a lot of places where things can start to diverge in other directions. It's not
I've heard
as
it
true in
compared
live
to
action because
yeah.
you're on a bit more of a treadmill in terms of time on live action. Although it's they're both the same thing. It really is just that dilated sense of time that that tends to kind of differentiate the two. I think it's kind of at the core of it.
Yeah, I've heard making a CG animated movie is like building a sandcastle one grain of sand at a time. I forget who said that, but that sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And live action, you can go out and find a great castle, but then you have to be ready. Oh my God, the sun's coming in the wrong way, and they're only open on Tuesday, and the rain's dripping there, and we have to be in that room, and so there's different strengths and different pros and cons involved with each approach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like live action, there's so many unknowns. It's like operating in real time and dealing with real time inspiration and real time catastrophic like weather events. But meanwhile, in animation, it's like it's almost the other end of that spectrum, and not necessarily in a good way. Like it's microscopic. It's like you control time, and there's a tendency to obsess. Oh,
yes,
so
and happens a lot in animation. You're missing the forest for the trees. You're focusing on details, whether that's a shot or a piece of business in a shot or an act or a scene, whatever, that you have to remind yourself, no, wait a minute, it's a whole movie, or it's a whole character, or it's a whole sequence that I have to pay attention to how this little tiny piece that I'm focusing on, how does that fit into the whole? And it's a constant thing in animation to sort of remember that there is a bigger picture. And the other thing is, in live action, so much of what you're doing is hoping that you can capture spontaneous moments, and that the life that you get from a performance or from a composition, whatever it is, or a happy accident, that's going to lend some life and spontaneity to what you get. In animation, you have to invent that stuff from the ground up. Jacob, it's that's one of the big things you strive for is how do I make it feel how do I make it feel real? How do I make it feel spontaneous enough that people are going to emotionally connect to it immediately?
Right.
So it's
how do you make it feel like the character's hearing this information for the first time and reacting authentically and genuinely, and not that you've spent 2 months trying to figure out the exact performance that he should have?
Exactly. So it's different ways of trying to achieve the same result, basically.
One thing that I really enjoyed about working with you as a director, Peter, was that you spoke to the animators a lot as if they were actors. And I really enjoyed getting that kind of performance level note, instead of like you needed the character to feel more angry in that moment or feel more frustrated, instead of some other directors I've worked with where they're like, let's clench the fist a bit more, let's bring the brows down a bit more, because they want to get to that angry part. But they're, instead of talking about it in terms of performance in general, and that let the animator try to figure out what the performance would be for that character and pitch a new idea. And I think that was really fun.
Yeah, well, I think part of that for me is, one of my dirty little secrets. I've never animated anything professionally. I come out of story. I've done my own little. Growing up, I did plenty of like stop motion, little clay creatures or whatever, and my own crude hand animated stuff. But I'm not trained as classically as an animator or anything like that. But through it's really been through like studying performance and studying the little a tiny bit of education, which is not very much at all, that I have in anything having to do with acting. But it's I tell anybody who wants to direct anything, or I tell animators, take an acting class, because you very quickly, when you have to be directed yourself as an actor, you realize what you need to hear to get you to understand what it takes to pull off a performance. And that was a big one for me. Actually, DreamWorks gave a class called acting for directors. And one of the things we all had to do was be directed by someone else. And it really was an eye-opening thing to realize, oh yeah, it doesn't work that well when you just say somebody will be a little happier in this scene. Okay, it's like you've got to be way more specific, and you've got to talk to people in a way that makes them understand how they can get there. Specifically what they're doing. And so
I remember you doing that a lot.
That kind of thinking kind of informed the way that I wanted to talk to you guys. Wanted to talk to the animators and get you to understand or see with me what the goal was, and well, how do we get there without how do we get there without making it all about, okay, give him angrier eyes or clenches, squint,
right.
Sometimes you do that, but what you really want is for somebody to give an authentic interpretation of the feeling.
Absolutely.
Which, to me, tends to work out much better. And it surprises me a lot of the times too, because an animator will come with something like, oh, I never would have thought of doing it that way, but it's great,
Yeah. Just like an actor would.
For me too.
Yeah. I remember you doing that a lot, and you would talk about what the character was going through that moment, but then you'd also give a completely different scenario that had nothing to do with the film, but it might be more relatable on a different level, and something that could correlate and find a way for the artist to get into the mindset of the character for what would be correlating to what would happen in the film. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think it's I know another thing I like, or that just the idea of collaborating with people and sort of like not I never liked when I was a storyboard artist, sometimes you get shot lists and you have to do it this way and don't deviate at all and yada yada yada. And sometimes you build enough of a relationship with the director and they say, you know what, take that scene on page 15 and just show me something, see what ideas you can come up with. And it brings, it invests you more in the process, and I think you do better work because you're not being treated like a robot, and it's one of those things where once everybody kind of signs on to the same vision and everybody understands what the ultimate target is, I think you can get great stuff. You can get great stuff that you never would have thought of on your own by bringing people into the process a little more that way. So I think that's what I was kind of trying to do, and to be honest, sometimes you don't have all the answers, but if you see somebody's, like Jacob was one of our guys working on Jack Frost, that was like, he would be coming with amazing stuff and great ideas, and it's like you'd be a fool not to try to take advantage of that. So it's like,
you're very kind.
Like, God, I really loved the other day when Jacob did that shot of Jack Frost and he was sad about, the Sandman dying. So the next time you have a good Jack Frost shot, you're going to go, Jacob, let's see what you can do with this. This is what I'm after. See what you got, and we can work it back and forth together. And it's just, I think it just produces a better, more well-rounded result, because you're getting more talented minds on it, not just my semi-talented one.
And you're capturing that lightning in a bottle you get on a movie set when you have actors that are riffing creatively, right? Like you're getting that same
100%.
kind of inspiration.
Exactly it. Animators can do that too,
Absolutely.
So that's what you want, their inspiration in the moment.
Yep.
What was it like trying to get everyone on board to the same mindset for Spider-Verse, since it was something that was kind of never been seen before, with the style and all of that stuff that was kind of groundbreaking in the industry? And how was it getting everybody on board to the same thing?
Yeah, that was wild. That was, I have to give so much of the credit to that to Phil Lord from right at the beginning. I remember there was, before I was even on the movie as a director, I actually storyboarded on that first. And Bob Persichetti was directing solo before that. And I was directing another movie that fell through, and then Bob asked if I wanted to come on and do some boarding, and I was like, oh yeah, because I had been in the running to direct on Spidey before, but I had just signed on to do this other thing, and I was like, I missed it by that much. So that when Bob asked me to come back and do some work, and I was, oh yeah, that'd be awesome. I love Spider-Man. So but Phil Lord, so really early on, I read this kind of treatment and kind of mission statement that Phil Lord had written. And Phil, he's just brilliant, you know, and he just had this take on it that was, you know, a lot of the spirit of that movie was in those early pages. It's very different from what was in the original treatment, but the spirit and the feeling of the movie and so much of the sensibility, you could kind of feel it there. So I think everybody who read that document had an idea of, okay, this is the feeling that we're after. This is the bullseye, and anything we can do to hit that is gonna be right for the movie. So we had a target, even though it was kind of hard to describe the target. We had a target that we could shoot for, and I just think it kind of pulled everybody through that process like a magnet, because it was pretty easy. It was pretty easy to know what didn't fit, what didn't work as we were working on it. But it was, I'm not gonna lie, that thing was hard.
Oh
it
man,
was really hard.
It had to have been. I'm wondering, like, we're like, because you know, like, as Jacob, that's a habit. As Jacob talked about how the, you know, there would have been, it was very different. It was unconventional in many ways. Yeah. There must have been people that are like, it's not going to work. Like, do you remember resistance, or was it like, were people just caught with were they really? Interesting.
Usually very little.
Interesting.
Very little, and it may have been just because we were all in a little bubble. But from the very beginning, I mean, that was also part. That was definitely was part of the vision. It was like, this is going to be completely different. It's going to be like something nobody's ever seen before. Mm-hmm. We want to stay away from all like animation tropes. We're not going to try to do it like they do in other animated movies. We don't want it to look like it. We don't want it to feel like it. None of that stuff. So that is like, you know, the reason that there's no motion blur in the movie, and we're animating it on 2s, not on 1s. But they don't do that in CG. Well, we're going to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So much of that stuff was just an effort to say, let's do something different. I mean, you know, classical CG movie making, let's face it, it's been pretty perfected in a way. The American feature film, you know, at that point, American feature film CG, it was like, well, you know, how much better can you make it than it's already, or in that idiom, in that sort of like Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks. I mean, it's like, it's just gonna be the same sort of thing over and over and over again. And we were all like, you know, I mean, I'm kind of like, I want to pull my eyes out rather than make something that's going to look exactly like those movies have looked for the past 5 or 6 years. So it was like, you know, getting to work with Phil and Chris, who were saying like, they were like, we want it to be so crazy that nobody's ever going to believe that this thing could exist. And we want to try this, and we want to make it look like a comic book, the book that's moving. And we want to have, you know, all these things. I was like, can you actually do that? You know, because in my experience at DreamWorks, it was like, you know, you hand your stuff over and it was like, well, this is pretty much, you know, what we can do and what it's going to look like. And you go, okay, that's great. And it's beautiful. But, you know, sometimes, you know how it is. It's like you see a piece of viz dev art and you go, wow, look at that. That's so cool. That's so cool. And then you get back from the studio. Oh, this is what it's going to be lit like and what's going to be rendered like. And, oh, well, okay. Well, it's, you know.
More of the same.
Yeah. Where'd all that magic go?
Yeah. But, you know, you'd see stuff that the painters were doing on Spider-Verse. And I would be like, wow, it would be great if we could get some of that feeling in this. And they were like, no. It's going to look exactly like that. Oh. And sure enough, we'd be sitting in digital reviews and there'd be a freeze frame on a piece of artwork, or so we thought. And then it would start to move and we'd be, I mean, it was just like, they can do that? So it was a whole different, like, it was a sea change for me, and just really understanding what was technically possible when
What I
you had a studio that was
Willing to
like
take the risk.
responsive
Yeah.
to what the
And
That's
creators
it.
really wanted.
Sony needed to create that environment where that risk
Yes.
was appetite was palatable, right? Like I think that so many of these studios get in the routine of like, this is the formula, this is how we make money,
Yeah.
we got to keep doing it like this, and it's a bold move to go and be like, or we could do it completely different. What I find
Yeah.
interesting about that recipe that your amazing team came up with is that it's you say it was like unlike anything that's ever been done before, which is true, but also kind of untrue, because it was very familiar, because you borrowed from a lot of classical sources. You were very true to it. You brought up a lot of these really amazing old, I think the idea of the chromatic aberration, like from like print media, and having that sort of separation. It's like these things, these things that end up maybe half or more of the audience didn't even notice. They just knew it felt different, but yet they also felt familiar because it was rooted so strongly in these really great sort of source materials. And that's what blew my mind away. Is like, you took all these great ideas that we've been surrounded by, and just put them all in the same bucket, and then said, how about this? And then everyone was like, yes, more of that, please. It's a lot more of that.
Right.
I know, it blew my mind watching that movie. I was just like, wow.
And I think the reason it kind of worked on a I think it really is because, we took a lot of things from, once the idea of let's make it like a comic book, and just diving into, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
What could we take from comics that really would communicate that? And in a broader sense, as in an animation context, we weren't taking things from other animated movies. We weren't saying, let's make this like a milk call, thing, or let's, it wasn't that. It was like, what can we take from other primary inspirational sources, whether it's comics, whether it's, illustration, whether it's graphic design, whether it's live action movies and photography. What can we draw from those to bring them into animation to create something new and fresh that's not just chasing its own tail and, trying to repeat what's been done in animation over the past however many years, because we're so into animation. It was like, how can we revivify it? And having the touchstone of comics, it kind of gave you a language right there to say, it's going to be more graphic. We wanted to be more graphic. How do we do that? What if we just drew lines on the characters and made them look like comic book illustrations to accent the emotions? What if we did that? And what if you did that? You could do it in the eyes. You could do it in the pupils. What if we just made everything look more as hand drawn as we could? What if we didn't? We want to have the animation style be graphic and punchy to fit with that design sensibility. Well, man, what if we did it on 2s instead of on 1s? So that you're holding those poses longer. And I have to give all credit to Bob Persichetti, who's trained as a Disney animator, trained under Glenn Keane. But he was so much of that animating on 2s, and what that meant down the line technically and creatively came from Bob, sort of like lighting that fire and like, really, really holding to that as an aesthetic principle. So it was fascinating to me to think about, to learn to think about the process in those terms, in terms of being really dedicated to pulling off an aesthetic and a vision. Really, I have to go to the word of a vision, because the whole thing like really was really did come out of that primary vision of we're gonna make it like nobody's ever seen before. We're gonna make it feel like a comic book.
Yeah. Is the animating on 2s thing, was there a hint of or was that utilized for the story a little bit too? I've seen some things online where people said that when Miles is swinging on the web and he's uncoordinated at the beginning, it's on 2s, and then when he becomes more coordinated, it goes to 1s.
No, that's an urban myth.
Okay.
It's actually an urban myth.
Yeah.
There may be some points in the anime. There may be a few points that are on 1s, but it was really, I remember it was like they were trying to be super religious about keeping things on 2s.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So Yeah, I've heard people say, "Oh, everybody else was animated on 1s except for Miles. He was on 2s until he got
Well, no,
better at
that's
being
not
Spider-Man. Then he was
right.
no, not the case.
It,
We just had
would be okay if,
damn good
can I just
animators.
pretend? Can I pretend that that was a thing? Because like it's the idea sounds really cool.
To each his own.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Cool.
I was gonna just. Oh, go ahead, Jacob. No, you go.
No, you. No.
We're gonna have. It's gonna have. That's what's happening right now. We're gonna have one of those fights.
30 years
Fine.
later.
I'll be there. Yeah. It's like, so I was just gonna say that the with regards to like now being like let's put it this way, you worked in live action, you obviously had some amazing experiences there, you got kind of pulled into this animation world, and it seems to have held you a little bit. So I'm curious, like, is that by design? Is it, do you find yourself having more, is like, I think I'm trying to remember the quote you had earlier. It was, I think someone was, when they were trying to pull you into Shrek, they said, oh, it's like, it's a form of pure cinematography or something. I can't remember what the phrase that you used was. Yeah. Pure cinema. Like, do you feel like that's true? Was that like was that a snake oil salesman's pitch that got you in, or is there some truth to that? And is that why you're still around?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, creative, in a creative sense, I think that's 100% true. I mean, if you're, with the elements that you have at your control in animation, I mean, you can fully visualize and yeah, you can. I mean, literally, you can do anything. Of course, there's limitations of what you can do financially, and there's limitations of just the marketplace and all that stuff. But as a medium, it's limitless. You can do anything, and the amount of control you can have is also it's so it's just amazing. But I mean, it's as I just said, yeah, but that was on the flip side of that. That was the other discovery was you can do anything in animation. You're only limited by your imagination. And then it's like, okay, but you got to turn this over in 2 weeks. And you only have so many man hours here for this scene and blah, 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 blah.
A blessing and a curse.
There's always some limitation, but man, the things you can do. And then, by the time, because I had a great experience on Guardians, just you just what you can do. I mean, I would so love to go back to that movie with what I know now and be able to do it all over again. God,
what would you do?
Incredible.
What were some of the main things you'd change? What would you do differently?
What's that? Oh, I would. There's plenty of. Believe me, I've lain awake at night. Hours and hours, like I would do this and I would do that and I would change this and I would cut that scene out. And there's tons of things. I never felt like we had enough time to really work the story. I never did. So that I think if I had my way, the third act would be super different. There's a ton of things, but I mean, and that it was my first movie, and I was kind of the new kid on the block in the midst of this, kind of whirlwind a lot of the time. So I was paddling hard just to keep up, honestly, through a lot of it. But
did you ever feel like you were a cog in a giant machine at DreamWorks?
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. And then
even in the director chair,
it's weird. So, it's weird. You do sometimes, and then other times everybody's looking at you like, "What do you think, Peter? What should we do?" And I'm like,
Yeah. Now you're listening.
That weird, but it's both things. It's that weird thing of you're part of this giant machine, and sometimes if you sometimes you can bend it your way. A lot of times you're pulled along by other concerns and other things, but sometimes, and that's part of the. I think that's part of experience, knowing that you can do that. I think on Guardians, I didn't fully understand how much power I actually could have had in some cases had I just really pushed,
Okay.
I mean, and a lot of times I didn't have that power. It was Jeffrey Katzenberg's studio, so it's like good luck. But yeah, sometimes, and there were some things I did push my way on Guardians, but it was a learning curve. It really was. I look at a guy. I still look at Brad Bird, and I just go, my God, what a genius. I look at something like, by the time he'd gotten to the Pixar movies, because Iron Giant was, that was astounding enough. And then, I just look at Incredibles and Ratatouille, and I go, my God, that guy's just playing that studio like an orchestra. Just like he's a virtue. So it's just that level of understanding of how you can guide an entire production is that's really special.
Interesting.
I think it's fun that someone like you with the crazy amount of experience and success you've had still look at other people and be like, man, that guy's so great. They do. It's awesome to hear that. Like I guess you always have, everyone's got someone to look up to and be inspired by, right? Everybody.
Absolutely. I feel like as long as I've been around, I'm just like, God, you haven't done anything yet. You just haven't done anything. When I think of the people that I really look up to, I'm just like, you got a lot of catching up to do.
You're right. After this conversation, I'm actually wondering why you're on the show. You sound like kind of a bit of a slacker, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I don't know how other way to say it. Yeah, dead weight. Yeah, exactly. So we talked a lot about the past and all these amazing things you've done. We're coming up on our last half hour. We usually do some Q&A, but there are a couple things I wouldn't mind talking about before we get into that. And that would be, where are things going? What are you doing? What do you find yourself doing now? Like what excites you? What do you feel is in the future for Peter Ramsey and possibly even the space you operate in? What are you thinking?
Yeah. I mean, wow. I'm really reaping the benefits of having been associated with Spider-Verse, which is, it's like, it really is like being on a team that wins the Super Bowl, so it's, I've gotten a little more freedom and more, I pinch myself. It's just like when I was storyboarding, I pinch myself, some of the people I get to work with now and some of the opportunities that I get. And I'm executive producing on several animated projects that I'm really excited about. There's one at Netflix called Prince of Port-au-Prince that's set in Haiti. It's being directed by a really genius director named Kibwe Tavares. It's going to be super cool. There's another project another one at Sony that's in very early stages, but it's set in South Africa. That's really great. There's what else? There's there's that Spider-Verse 2 that there's
what?
I'm kind of like, I'm not day to day intimately involved with that one, but I still see stuff, and I give them my 2 cents every once in a while.
Well, your role has changed. You're not directing that. You're operating on a higher level, right? You're executive producing it, correct?
Yeah. So I'm just, and which is really just like, every once in a while, if they, they're all tired of looking at it themselves, they want another point of view, and I come in and give my 2 cents. But that's going great, and that's going to have some. It's going to be really cool.
We should
I can't say much about it, but
it's
awesome. Going to be a blast.
What's that like? So now you're, we just casually dropped the fact that you're now executive producing things, but is that that's a whole other thing to of course, wrap your head around? What's that been like, transitioning into a role like that?
Oh, it's wild. It is one of those things where I'm like, people want to know what I think. What are you like? What is this? And it's a strange thing. It's an adjustment for me, because I so much of my career has been I'll just put it bluntly, executing other people's ideas, or helping, signing on to other people's visions and helping to, make those work, while kind of like having my own kind of, in my little, my little treasure chest locked off to the side.
You've been
But,
shepherding other people's sheep as opposed to your own.
Yeah, exactly, totally. And now it's like, hey, I got a couple little calves of my own over here. This is great.
Yeah.
So finally being able to sort of put my own stuff out into the world, which is gradually starting to happen. Finally, really being in a position, honestly, where people are like, well, how would you do this? What do you think? What do you, after kind of, getting some validation on a couple of things. And so that gives you a sense of, confidence and achievement. But as I said, it's like, I'm lucky that it took me so long, and that I have the perspective of not thinking that I know everything, So I think it lets me, I'm kind of more relaxed about what the making of these things, because I know how fluid of a process it is. And I've learned to trust my instincts a lot more. So that's a huge thing.
I guess you'd have to, because now you have lots of projects happening at the same time. You're involved in multiple rather than be laser focused on like one, right?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, that is another thing. Once you start, being considered a director in your own right, you're like, oh, I got to have like 17 things going, because only like 2 of these bad boys are ever going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
But what else am I doing as director? We were talking about it a little bit before. I did a little animated short for the We the People series on Netflix, which was super fun. I worked with the company, production company Buck, and that was great. And
that was produced by Barack and Michelle Obama, right?
Right.
Yep.
Their
How did
company,
that come
Hired
about?
Ground, was involved in it, and Chris Nee, who does Doc McStuffins and all that other stuff, she was the real like driving force on that one. Okay. And then a bigger thing that I actually, put on my directing hat for is a hybrid miniseries for Netflix called Lost Ollie. And that is, it's adapted from an original book, again, curiously enough, by William Joyce, who did the Guardian stuff. But Shannon Tyndall, who created Kubo and the Two Strings, was the creator and lead writer and showrunner of the series. And it's a 4-part miniseries, and we don't have a release date yet, but we're closing in on finishing the animation. I shot all the live action stuff with the actors and the plates in Vancouver last year, and we've been working on the animation with ILM for the past year. So that's super exciting. I can't wait for people to see it. It's going to be I feel like it's another one of those things like, hey, you haven't quite seen anything like this.
No, that's fun.
Cool. Very excited.
It's pretty different. Shannon is a great writer. As anybody who knows Kubo, it's that guy's brain, on a whole new project, and I think it's super interesting.
That's awesome. Now, all of those projects sound like still herding other people's sheep. What about your sheep? Your projects? You said they're starting.
I would say yeah, to a degree. Ollie was a thing where I really sort of feel like I got to play the director role in a way that was really more as an equal collaborator. It was really working with Shannon. He and I are good friends, and we like read each other's writing and all kinds of stuff. And it really was like a true back and forth. So that one feels like, oh yeah, that's cool. It feels like there's a lot of me in there, and awesome. So I'm pretty proud of what we did together on Ollie. But in terms of my own little 100% Peter Ramsey sheep, there's a couple of live action projects I'm connected to. There's one of them that is in development. That is a live action story of the Robert Johnson legend, Robert Johnson, the blues singer.
Okay.
And it's sort of it's not a straight biopic. It really is more about the legend of the guy who supposedly sold his soul at the crossroads. So it's cool. A take on that. There's a couple of other live action projects that are that I'm connected to. that I'm attached to, rather. And then there's another one that I wrote myself that Paramount is on board with, and
Oh, that's exciting.
yeah, that one's
Congrats.
super fun. That's something I've been working on for a little bit, and I'm rewriting it now. I'm dealing with studio notes and wrangling those and rewriting, and we'll see. You know, yeah, we're just hoping for a green light at some point, and hope I actually get to do it. But it's
Is that one live action or animated? I don't know if you said.
this is live action. This is live action.
Okay.
It's kind of a supernatural thing set in Los Angeles in the late 1950s.
Cool.
So it's around the time that my mom and dad came to town. So it's got a lot of stuff drawn from, like, their kind of their world when they were, like, most of your guys' age. I'm older than a lot of you guys, so. But I hope it's going to be really fun, and again, it's just striving for, like, what can be, like, totally different, what can be really something what's a combination of elements that people just will be going like, wait a minute, what? How did you put those things together, and why does it seem to work?
Cool.
Kind of
Awesome.
I
how
can't help
pushing at that forefront of what's different. What have we not seen before, and how can we make it?
100%. Yeah.
I can't help but to think, like, what would that young Peter Ramsey that worked at that bookstore think if you could go visit him now and be like, yeah, what if I told you, kid, that in years from now you'll have Paramount optioning one of your friggin' one of your stories, one of your screenplays? You'd be like, man, I don't even write screenplays right now.
Yeah.
I'm an illustrator, damn it. That would just blow that kid's mind, man.
He would, part of him would go like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. Part of him would had enough
part of the
ego
plan
to be like,
yeah.
Those were like the fantasy daydreams, way off. But no, he'd be totally blown away. Totally blown away. And there's a couple of things I can't talk about yet that he'd really be like, like agog at. But those are still under wraps. But everything that's happening now, I mean, if I had just told him you're going to work on a Spider-Man movie one day.
Oh yeah.
Falling down dead on the floor.
Yeah.
Because at that time,
would you have any advice for that kid?
Yes, I do. I have plenty. Just don't quit. Keep doing it. Just don't, whatever. If it feels, if it really feels right to you and you love it, and you really want to be part of it, don't quit. There's going to be setbacks. But it's like you're climbing on the side of a mountain in a windstorm. You just hold on when the wind is trying to blow you off, and then when it calms down, just keep climbing up, and you'll get there. That is one of the weird, mysterious things to me about this business, is that if you just keep trying and you don't accept setbacks. And you have to do it in good faith. You can't be, don't be an asshole, and you're not going to cheat your way into it. If you're sincere about what you're doing and you're putting in the work, something at some point is going to happen. It's just, I almost guarantee it. So I just tell people, just don't quit. Just keep going. That's awesome. The number one biggest thing.
And don't be an asshole.
Yeah, and don't be an asshole.
Usually good advice in general. Yeah,
closely followed by that, because as you guys, as many of you probably know, it's it's the PA who's bringing the lunches or the coffees, and 5 years they're going to be running the studio. So
it also goes to show you that, like, you had this amazing earnest conversation with some editor that worked in the film industry at that day, and because you gave all of yourself to that conversation, they were inspired by your infectious enthusiasm, and they couldn't help themselves but to give you a little bit of a helping hand, because they're like, you deserve this, man. You're excited, and now here we are.
When I told him, I love that movie, The Right Stuff. I love this.
Yes.
And he was like, you know what? I was so depressed and down making that movie. It was so hard and this and that. And really, wow, to know somebody like that much really does something for. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, The Right Stuff is a pretty cool movie though. But for those who haven't seen that movie, it's a movie
Oh,
about
it's great.
essentially, yeah, it was the
Great.
trip to the moon, was it not?
Great movie. It was about the original Mercury astronauts and
That's
how
right,
they had
yeah.
been test pilots, and
That's right. Yeah.
fantastic movie. I see somebody
good
in the
movie.
chat asking another question.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, people in your position start in their 20s or younger. Is it possible for somebody in their mid to late 30s to get to where you are? Yes, absolutely, 100%. I consider myself very much a late bloomer because I started a family relatively early, so that you have other concerns. You can't be 110%, all career all the time. So there's going to be other things in life that are just as important as a career that you have to pay attention to. But I don't think, if you're older, I didn't start like actually getting the chance to really direct stuff pretty much till I was getting into my 40s. And I had wanted to do it since I was like 19, I think, when I said I'm going to be a director someday.
That's right. You were ready.
It's taken me forever, but I mean, that goes with the don't quit part. It's like, even you're going to start feeling like an idiot that it hasn't happened by a certain point, and you're going to get, you'll be disheartened because you think you look ridiculous, and you're going to give up. And it's like, well, don't just try to stick it out. If it's really, if you really want it, if you really, I guess you got to be semi-realistic too, but only semi,
Yeah, I mean, I think that whole realism part is, I think, the hard part that some people have to balance in their brains. Like, not everyone can be a Peter Ramsey or a Steven Spielberg, but it doesn't mean that that's some sort of a failure. Just to be able to work in an industry that's as exciting as film industry is already a big. That's especially if you are. It seems like a big gap, anyways. If you're just starting out, like, there's a lot to happen between going to school for something and actually getting that first job. You know what I mean? So. And you never know what happens when you get there. It could just snowball. Basically, is what happens to so many people.
That's it. And you can't. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy of like this. Instant discovery, or like, there are like Mozart level people or people really brilliant who, I mean, you look behind a lot of those stories, and of course, there's always where his dad was this, or they were in the business since then, or they had these connections. Right. And there are also some people who they devoted all their every waking hour and to make some little short film when they were 18 that blew up on the festival circuit, and here they are. So there's those stories, but if you're doing the work, if you're putting the work in and really sincerely going after it, and you don't give up, I'm telling you, just keep doing that. That's gonna pay off one way or another. I'm gonna use
this as a segue to actually put more questions up, because we are in that segment of the show. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna keep throwing
Not at all.
Scott's been handily putting them aside for us, so I'll just drop them here kind of in order. So we have one here from I can never pronounce these handles. Vilsco. How do you feel about the Spider-Verse? So how do you feel about that the Spider-Verse influenced so many people's sort of desire to pursue a career? I don't know. I'm having a hard time. I think I might be having a stroke.
She sells,
yeah, that's right. So basically, how do you feel about it being such an iconic film that you literally are now generating interest in an entire career? You have young people now going, I want to be an animator because I saw this movie, just like you wanted to be a director because you saw E.T. Yeah. How does that make you feel?
Amazing. I mean, that's like, you can't get better praise than somebody being inspired by what you've done. It's absolutely incredible to me, because you're right. That was exactly the feeling that I had when I was a kid, sitting in a movie theater, seeing something and going, my God, this feeling that I have from watching this. I wish I could be a part of that somehow. I wish I could be part of something that made me feel like that, or made other people feel like that. Yeah. And that's the greatest, man. I remember, the reason that I didn't, I think the reason probably that I didn't jump off a building after Rise of the Guardians didn't do well when it opened at the box office was because I would get all these, I would get letters, I would get people coming up to me after screenings and
Yeah.
telling me how much that movie touched them and gave them their childhoods back and how much it meant to them and how they'd like, I mean, I'm not joking. I got more than one letter saying with a version of my son or daughter was autistic and they haven't laughed or cried in 5 years, and I saw Jack Frost and they cried,
lit up.
they laughed, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just like you go like, wow, all the like the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into these things, it reaches people, you know, and it and just like this, I'll be signing like, you know, art making of books, you know, someplace, and there'll be like guaranteed more than one person. I just want you to know I got into animation because of your movie, or I became a writer because of your movie, you know, and it's like you can only like
incredible, right?
Yeah,
The circle.
I'm sure it's happened to you, Jacob. I'm sure that's happened to you.
Oh, for sure. That's definitely happened.
Not as much as it's happened to you. I did receive a handful of fan mail at DreamWorks because of Jack Frost. People somehow researched online that I was part of the Jack Frost team, and they sent their own drawings and how it reached them and things similar to that. That was really cool. That movie especially seems to touch people. Even though it didn't have a gigantic box office, but
that's success. It's like success on a different level, right? Like it's like, you know, and I guess as a filmmaker or just anybody who gets paid to do this job, it's hard to not be a little bit concerned or somehow measuring success based on like the return, like the actual, you know, the money aspect of a property. But like, it's nice when this can happen, where it's like, it's because it's not supposed to be just about the money, right? It's like, it's nice when it can be about actually bringing a story to people that actually, you know, makes them feel good about something or can help them with something, you know, like that's like next level as far as I'm concerned. Just full disclosure, I'm not saying this because you're on the call, but this is a Guardians friendly house. We definitely are big fans. But do you feel like this is kind of going backtrack really quick, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but do you feel like there was a reason why it wasn't because if it's touched so many people on that level, why then do you think it wasn't a success in the box office the way it should? Was it a marketing problem? Like, I'm just curious.
I think it was marketing. I think it was the release date. I think it was I think it primarily was a combination of those two things. Because it sounds kind of weirdly trivial, but it got released on the weekend before Thanksgiving, and it's got Santa Claus in it, so it looks like a Christmas movie. And I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, we'll get to that later."
Interesting.
We're still, I'm driving cross country to grandma's or whatever. You know, I think there's definitely the weekend they chose to open it. I think. There was also the thought in marketing at the time. Wow, I'll never forget it. Was that's like, well, there's no other animated movies coming out around this time, so the market will be all ours. Neglecting to, take into account that Skyfall had just opened a week before, which was becoming this massive runaway hit. Also, I think the same weekend, the latest Twilight movie had opened. So it was this thing where it's like, it was this kind of new phenomenon of, the competition for animated movies now is not just other animated movies; it's just other movies. Period. Yeah. Because of how much overlap there is. That there wasn't before with animated movies. So I think it was that as well. And I think there was just a fundamental misunderstanding of what that movie actually is, which it's like an epic fantasy with these characters. Yeah. And it's not just, I think the advertising kind of made it, at least the TV spots made it look like it was like, you know,
Slapstick.
Despicable Me with
It's true.
at Christmas time or something like that.
I remember being surprised by the movie when I watched it, which is
Yeah.
usually a sign that the way it marketed itself was not
I
what
heard
the
it
film really
over
was.
and over and over again.
I was surprised.
People would go, you know, I saw that movie and it wasn't
Yep.
anything like what I expected.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing to me is, you know, you get your little cards back from the preview audiences when you preview it, and the movie was scoring like
Yeah.
you know, super high, and people would write, what are your favorite things about it? What do you know, what did you like most? And I'm like, why don't you make that the advertising? What are the things that you're saying they like the most?
Exactly.
It's the story of this boy who had his incredible adventures. Make that the advertising.
Yeah.
Don't try to make it look like, you know, Despicable
Let me be
Me.
the marketing guy. Well, but you know, that stuff doesn't sell. Okay.
Yeah, and you literally have people telling you what they love about it. It's like, just do that.
Yeah. It's I remember watching it, and like it was one of those movies, and I have a bunch of these movies in my past where it's like I wasn't in a rush to see it at all.
Yeah.
I saw it out of almost coincidence, almost like let's try this, you know. And then I was like, why did I wait so long to watch this? This is the feeling that I had when I was watching it, and I'm like, why are people not talking about this everywhere? Is how I felt, and I felt like I was sort of like maybe a minority, but.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get through the rest of these questions because I could probably spend an hour on that point alone. But let's see what we got. We got a question from Lark87. You called out the term spine of the story. It's a term clearly defined by Robert McKee in Story. I wonder what have been some books that have helped you in directing, writing, and leading.
Yes, that's
Good
a great one. The McKee book is fantastic. I've drawn a lot from that, a lot of just primary understanding about what it is. There's a great book, one of my favorite books on definitely on screenwriting, but there's also a ton of great stuff on directing. It's a book called On Filmmaking by a guy named Alexander McKendrick. And Alexander McKendrick, way back in like the 50s and 60s, he was a director. He directed one of my favorite movies, which is The Sweet Smell of Success. And he's just ultra smart. And he made a few more movies, and then he went to go teach at Cal Arts. And he was the first dean of the film department there. Yes, thanks. Somebody just posted the link. It's a brilliant book. And the thing I love about it is it's a book that deals a lot with screenwriting, but it's written from the perspective of a director who has to take a screenplay and then analyze it and translate it into, you know, shots and scenes and so it's super insightful. It's not formulaic like a lot of screenwriting books you run into. So I would highly recommend that people check that book out.
That's great. I was writing down notes actually because that's the second one there.
Here somewhere.
Would you have both of them or just the one?
Just the one.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say the McKendrick one. I got to go check that one out myself.
That's a great book. Great.
Good. That is awesome. Good question, by the way. Laura, that was awesome. Okay, we got another one here from Scott. What has he got here? He's got, after working on movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, Dracula, Casper, and Men in Black, do you have any good pointers you learned from storytelling in horror and sci-fi specifically?
You know, I don't know that I don't know that the pointers for that are any different than they would be anyplace else. You know, there's just general. I think there's just general principles of filmmaking, period, that you just have to understand, you know, to be able to really make those things work. I mean, it's all about timing. You know, so much of this stuff is just about timing, and it's about creating suspense through how much it's when you're telling the audience what you want them to know. You know, you always just have to remember you're the one who's in charge of how much information the audience gets and how they get it. So if you think of it that way, then I think things start to become a little more manageable, because it's like, well, wait a minute, if the audience knows this, how does that affect their reaction to what I want them to react to? And what if I don't let them know that yet? Or what if I only let them know half of it?
Yeah.
What if
you want them asking questions? Asking
Yeah,
good questions.
how do I
to keep
give
them
them? It's
intrigued.
almost like, in a super cruel way, it's like, how do I just let just enough oxygen in just to keep them alive,
Totally.
but not so much that they can run up and go,
Yeah.
hey, wait a minute,
Yeah.
you know? So
Which
it's
is-
like, or breadcrumbs. Maybe that's a little more humane. How do you just drop enough breadcrumbs that they have just enough, but they keep needing to have more so that they can eventually get to, oh my God, that's what it's all about. So, and that's the fun of it too, is like, you know, how do you play with the audience's frame of reference and their the amount of information they have.
I always find myself going back and referring to Jaws is one of my favorite go-to like horror movies that was just like, it really, by breaking that movie down. And I've seen so many great like talks on, you know, breaking that movie down. So this has been well studied by now. And I just love it because it feels like it goes against the typical expectations that you would have to be doing as a director. Directors are usually trying to, you know, provide the audience to want to have something or have information, and then you give it to them. And then basically there's sort of this, there's this sort of circular manipulation going on, but with horror, and it's like in thrillers, you get to play with that a little bit different. Like you want them to want the information, and then you, like you said, you just sort of you tease it to them. You give them just enough, or you misdirect them in a good way so that they have a good surprise at the end. I really like them. You take a look at the horror space now. There's so many new players entering the space right now that's really disrupting it. Like, have you seen the trailer for Nope?
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I want to see that movie so bad.
What is that? You know,
It's
and
just-
I
it
don't
just
know if that's
feels
really
so
horror
fresh.
or what.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't really tell exactly what genre that is.
I don't know.
Which kind of like, I kind of come back to this point that, you know, the all the stuff that you use in horror to create those effects, you use them all in any genre. You use them in drama too. That's
totally,
you know, drama can be all about, well, who knows what, and at what point does this character find out this information that, you know, will change how they feel about this other person or this other situation. You know, so it's all about withholding and then presenting information. So much of it is just about that.
Yeah, totally.
Just about that, whether it's visually or emotionally, texturally, whatever it is.
I've got it's 3:30. Well, at least where I'm living. So we're technically done. Do you have time for one last question so I can kind of wrap it? Okay.
Yeah, I've time for a couple more.
Okay, you're amazing. All right, so we have a question here from Taha Animation. Can a director be also a writer that gets to direct their own story?
I hope so. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's plenty of writer-directors. Yeah, Brad Bird writes his stuff, you know.
Writes into
I mean, you know, you name it. Edgar Wright. I mean, you can go down the list. There's like Francis Coppola wrote a bunch of his own stuff. John Singleton wrote it, you know. So there's, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's probably happens less often than directors that are directing other people's stories, but it's not unprecedented. It does happen.
Yeah, it's not at all. And it's you know, the way that I actually got started really writing myself. And by the way, one of my projects, I wrote it, and I'm hoping to direct it. So I remember right around the time when I decided I'm going to be a director, and one of my favorite directors was Akira Kurosawa, who did Seven Samurai and, you know, Jimbo and
classic.
And, you know, just some of the greatest films of all time. And I was reading his autobiography, and he was talking about how he first got into the movie industry way back in Japan in like the 1930s. And I'll never forget the beginning of one chapter. He was talking about writing. He said, if you want to be a director, one of the first things you must do is learn to write screenplays. And like, I'm not joking. I almost immediately put the book down and said, okay, I'm going to start writing. Right
Challenge accepted.
Right now. And it's so true. I mean, I would encourage anybody who's interested in filmmaking or directing, just start writing yourself. And you just start, it teaches you so much about what are the bones of storytelling, how does a scene work, what is structure, you know, which is a huge thing that you've got to know. You've got to know it if you're interested in storytelling, so that you know what you're doing in one part of the story, how it connects to something you're doing in another part of the story. That's like the most basic way of talking about structure. But
Yeah.
it's like, and it's just a great fun rabbit hole to fall down. Once you start understanding some of this stuff about how stories are put together, you will never want to stop learning about it. So I would say just learn, start writing yourself, and you'll learn tons and tons of stuff.
It makes a lot of sense. It's like, it feels like it would be like, you know, it would be to not understand the story process like that would be a lot like a conductor of an orchestra not knowing how to read music. It'd be kind of weird, right? Like you need, like you said, you need to understand the structure so well, because you are now going to be the shepherd. You're going to be the one making sure that that story will actually make it up on the screen for people to actually understand. And how are you going to do that if you don't actually understand the story itself? Makes a lot of sense.
And it doesn't mean you've got to be Shakespeare, you know, but it should mean that you know enough about, you know, that you can say, you read a script and you should be able to tell somebody why something works or why it doesn't. Okay. You know, at least have your own take on it, and like be able to say, you know, there's something that happens in the first act that I don't think is paying off properly in the third act, and that's why the ending doesn't feel right. And, you know, you've got to be able, if you can analyze things on that level, then you're going to be so much better when it comes to actually, you know, telling the story and talking to your actors about why they're doing what they're doing. And like, you know, every decision you make as a director comes out of the story, and you just have to understand what that means.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome.
I want to say thank you. Honestly, you took an hour and a half out of what I'm sure is a ridiculously busy day to come and hang out with us, to nerd out about animation, about film, about storytelling, and I cannot thank you enough. And I'm sure the community feels exactly the same way. So from me and everyone in the community, thank you, Peter, for hanging out with us today. It was awesome.
Oh, it was a pleasure. When Jacob asked me about it, I was just like, you know, he was. I'm not lying. He was one of our real stars on that movie, and it was, you know, a real important movie to me. So
make him blush. Make him blush. Do it.
Well, hey, he's a super talent. You know. So.
You're very kind, Peter. Thank you very much.
No, not at all. Not at all. You were a hero on that movie. So that's always been important to me, and. So yeah, I'm super happy to be able to talk to you again. Actually, I was like, hey, it's Jacob. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, this has been awesome, and I'm glad that you were able to find some time for us.
Yeah,
because like you said, the amount of projects you have going on right now, I can't imagine how busy your day is. Like, you need a spreadsheet to figure out all of the things you have that you're involved in, even little ways. There's so much. It's crazy. So thank you so much, and this has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been really fun for me too. Thanks, guys.
Hopefully it was pleasant enough that we can maybe rope you back into another one at some point to get an update on some of these exciting new projects that you're not allowed to talk about. That
So check back in check back later this year.
Perfect. We're coming for you, Peter. Thanks a lot. Awesome. Have a really good day, both of you, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Okay, guys. Take care. Thanks for coming.
Wow, I was trying to restrain myself from not completely just going full starstruck. It's funny because when we started Agora.Community, and myself and Jacob and David, we sat down and we're like, let's make a list of people that we would just like love to have on the show. And this list, we'll share it one day. It's pretty funny. But, some of these we're like, look, let's just go blue sky. Like, who would we want? Like, who are the people we look up to, the people that we would love to just hang out with and pick their brains, like just us. Like, what if we were to selfishly use the show to literally have people on it that we can be like, tell us the magic, explain it to us? Because we knew that if we brought people on that we felt like that, obviously everyone in chat would probably feel very similar because we all are cut from the same cloth. And, typically, these people are icons for all of us. And we had there's some pretty big people on that list. And I have to say that honestly, there's a lot of people getting knocked off that list. It's kind of impressive. And so this whole thing is, I say it all the time, and I'm going to continue to say it. It's a privilege to be able to sit in this chair with people like Jacob and David and everyone else who comes on the show and just meet people like Peter that for whatever reason, I just had a conversation with Christine as I was upstairs grabbing something to eat really quick before the show. And she was like, who's on the show today? I'm like, oh, well, Peter Ramsey. And she's like, isn't that the director from Spider-Verse? I'm like, yes. She's like, okay. Are you nervous? I'm like, well, yeah, a little bit. And she's like, that's kind of a big deal, right? And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is a big deal. Like, it is a kind of a big deal that I'm going to go and just hang out with somebody who is like, and then she says, like, how do you guys get these people on the show? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like between Jacob, myself, and David, we just happen to have these acquaintances that just seems to lead to these amazing people. That and it's one thing. It's obvious that we would be able to know somebody like Kevin Bacon style, like 6 degrees of separation. But what I find fascinating is people like Peter, who are very, very busy. You heard all the things he's got going on. They take the time to sit down and just talk about stuff like this. And I feel like it's, I feel like a lot of them, if not all of them, feel like they have something to give back to community, give people hope so they also could achieve their dreams. Because he still, as you can see, vividly remembers working at in a bookshop and ran into somebody in happenstance that just happened to give him his first big sort of, that was his Genesis moment for sure. And so I just think it's great. It's funny that he said that he's so, when he's sitting in the theater looking at ET and thinking to himself, man, I want to be that one day. I want to be part of that community. And he's transcended that. And he's now become the person who other people sit in the audience and look at his work and go, I want to do that. It's crazy when you think of how big that is. That's huge. And so obviously him showing up to the show is his way of sort of giving back to that person who's sitting in the audience that's just like he was back in the day. And he's hoping that he hopefully inspires somebody to chase their dreams and do what he does. Because he's obviously living, that child in him is very, very well alive, I can guarantee you. And he's living the dream right now. And we get to live that dream vicariously through his work when you see things like Spider-Verse. Because I don't know about you, and I know it's sort of obvious to say that movie was awesome, but like I remember watching that and I stopped dead in my head and was like, what am I watching? This doesn't get made. This movie doesn't even make any sense. Like some of the sequences, like with the way that they integrated the sort of the onomatopoeia, like the sort of the wham and blam, all the sort of the comic book sort of sound words up on the screen during certain moments. I was just like, how are they doing that in a way that just seems natural, like it's been done before when it hasn't? So I don't know. It takes a special person who's willing to chase those dreams and just keep climbing that mountain. Like I said, no matter how windy it gets. So thank you, community, for being here. Hopefully it was inspiring. This is exactly the kind of conversation we're trying to bring to the to your days. To hopefully it brightens them up a little bit. It's not always super bright outside, and we understand that. So these conversations, I think, are really important because it does give us hope, gives me hope, and hopefully it does to you as well. So thanks for being part of it. See you on the next one. Stay animated, my friends, and I think our next stream is probably not till tomorrow. Yeah, well, tomorrow, not till tomorrow. Tomorrow is coming really quickly, but we're going to have, I think it was going to be a Q&A, but I think what's happening is it's going to be, I think it's going to be one of our free review nights. So if you've been in Discord lately, you might have heard people sort of drumming up some interest in maybe submitting work to be reviewed live. So make sure that you go chase down that form. And I see your hydrate. I see it, Taha Animation. I have very little water, but I'm going to use it right now. There we go. By the way, I forgot to turn off all the channel points in the middle of the and Petar somehow found a way. I've filled the hole. He found a sort of a workaround there. Somehow it didn't get turned. One of them didn't get turned off. So if I forget sometimes, do me a favor and try to avoid doing anything too distracting during the stream, because there's a lot of little switches I have to turn on and off to be able to make that fun on streams, that it can be fun. So just try to use your discretion when we're having a conversation like that, because it can be a little distracting when there's lots of crazy noises going on. I'll try to get better at making sure that they're off, because it's not anyone's fault. If they're on, it seems like, why wouldn't I use it if it's on? But sorry, back to what I was saying about Discord. There is a form, I believe, floating around Discord, I think in the feedback channel, if I'm not mistaken, that if you fill out, you can actually submit your work to be reviewed on these free reviews that we're trying to do somewhat regularly. So we're going to have one of those nights tomorrow. And it looks like Scott just posted in a chat, which I wasn't actually looking at because I was still looking at the pinned questions. So that's awesome. Thank you, Scott. So you can actually just click on that right there and fill out the form directly, and you will be able to get put in the queue. We just randomly select people. What we'll probably end up doing eventually is having sort of giveaways to get like bumped to the top of that list. Every once in a while. This is one of the obvious things we can do. And basically, for now, it's me that does these, but we want to eventually have other people come in and do them, especially people who can't commit to doing regular reviews. And because there's a lot of people we talk to that want to do reviews and help the community out, but they feel like they're a little bit too busy, that they can't commit to being like a regular reviewer. So this is a perfect kind of, it's a perfect stage to use for people that can just be doing one-off reviews, spend like an hour and a half hanging out doing reviews, but it's sort of like it's one night. They just have to book off the one night, and they can hang out, have fun, and give back to the community a little bit, and then move on with their life without having worrying about other reviews totally ambushing them in the middle of some sort of production crunch. So anyways, I'll shut up. I'll see you tomorrow night if you can make it. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next stream. Cheers.